Chapter 1556. Li Qingshan was blown away from the Hell Realm by the gale, and his state immediately started to regress. The neither thought nor no thought tranquility collapsed in an instant, followed by the nothing tranquility, the boundless tranquility of consciousness, the boundless tranquility of emptiness. It was as if he had fallen from a high altitude and lost his balance. He forgot the meaning of emptiness as form, and only some remnant thoughts were left. He exhausted all of his spirit and his consciousness was in a mess. He couldn't even maintain the most basic thoughts. In a trance, he felt himself lying on the moist ground, and the sound of running water rang in his ears. The sunlight shone through the gaps of the leaves. Everything that happened in the Hell Realm and even the colorless realm was like a dream. The pain and realization, the torture and revenge, all seemed extremely unreal. When his thoughts gradually recovered, he had the first thought, "Where am I?" His whole body was numb from the gale and he couldn't even move a finger. He tried his best to turn his head and observe the surroundings. The sun was bright, the waves were sparkling and the grass was green. It was a scene of spring. This riverbank was a common scene in his youth, and he had never felt so intimate and pleasant. I should have been sent back to the human realm. Sai, if you don't go to hell, you won't know the benefits of the human realm. Since he couldn't move, he closed his eyes to rest. At this moment, there was a sound in the forest. Li Qingshan opened his eyes again and turned his head to look. A big brown bear peeked its head out of the dense forest. I won't be eaten by a bear, right? Sai, what am I thinking? I'm not made of flesh and blood, but then again, would a bear eat someone who pretended to be dead? Just as he was letting his thoughts run wild, the big brown bear completely walked out of the forest and stood straight in front of him. A man's face was revealed under the bear's head, and it turned out to be a man wearing a bear's skin. Li Qingshan couldn't help but laugh. The man also laughed and said with a strange accent, I thought it was prey, so it's a man. Li Qingshan saw the bow and arrows in his hand, and the quiver on his waist. He must be a hunter in the mountains. However, the painted face looked very heroic and fierce. It left a deep impression, and he must be a tyrannical person who could do whatever he wanted in the mountains. Li Qingshan tried his best to move his tongue and said vaguely, Brother, do you have wine? The man was stunned. He touched the wineskin on his waist and asked, How did you know I had wine? Li Qingshan licked his lips and smiled. You don't look like someone who drinks water. Ha, I always drink wine like water. The man took out the wine bag and gulped it down. The fragrance of the wine overflowed. Li Qingshan was envious. He hurriedly said, Don't finish it, leave a few mouthfuls for me. He had never missed the taste of fine wine so much. The man looked him up and down. How do you drink it? Li Qingshan opened his mouth wide and nodded vigorously. Ah, the man didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He turned his wineskin and a stream of sparkling wine fell into Li Qingshan's mouth. This. Li Qingshan's eyes suddenly widened. He had never tasted such delicious wine before. Even the legendary bejeweled nectar was nothing more than this. Sai, the colorless realm was too torturous. Just thinking about it made him feel pity. The man ignored Li Qingshan's pleading gaze. He decisively put away the wineskin. Little brother, where are you from? Why are you lying here? Li Qingshan smacked his lips. Bro, give me a few more mouthfuls. Don't be so stingy. I don't lack money. The man laughed. Don't be discontented. I also have to leave a few mouthfuls. Li Qingshan helplessly said, All right. I was blown here by the wind. The wine entered his stomach and turned into a warm current. His whole body felt warm, dispelling the numbness. He felt strong again. He crawled up on his hands and feet. What is this place? The man laughed. Nonsense. How can there be such a strong wind in the world? It can even blow a person of your age up. Li Qingshan moved his limbs. Not to mention a person of my age, even the 3 mountains and 5 sacred mountains can be blown up. Ah, you really know how to brag. Li Qingshan chuckled. Of course I can brag too. He didn't try to argue and only said, Thank you for your wine. What are you hunting? The man suddenly knocked an arrow on his bow and pointed it at Li Qingshan's nose. Bull hunting. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but take a step back. He was actually a little scared. The man put away his bow and arrow. It's a pity that there are fewer and fewer bulls. Instead, there are more and more people who brag. Li Qingshan let out a sigh of relief. That chill disappeared. He laughed at himself. His realm had suddenly regressed. Even his courage had shrunk. You're alone? No, I have a tribe. Li Qingshan joked. Oh, you're even a leader. The man raised his arms and opened his chest. He laughed brightly. I'm also a witch. Li Qingshan found it interesting. Your tribe must be very big. The man said proudly, big. It's extremely big. Wherever the sun shines, it's my land. He inadvertently revealed a trace of domineering aura. Li Qingshan was shocked. He came back to his senses and laughed in his heart. What an arrogant and overbearing village chief. Where the sun shines. Do you think you're a lion king? The man suddenly said to Li Qingshan. How about it, little brother? Join my tribe. I'll give you all the land under the sun. You'll have endless wine and beauties. You won't have to worry about being blown around by the wind. Li Qingshan's eyes were full of smiles. Don't tell me you're going to take over this fish pond. Brother, if you give me all the land under the sun, where are you going to put you, the leader? The man pointed upwards. The sky belongs to me. That's reasonable. Li Qingshan finally couldn't help but laugh. You said I'm bragging. You're practically bragging until the sky breaks. The man only smiled. Li Qingshan finally stopped laughing. All right, I'll join. The man nodded slightly. He had the demeanor of a king. It was as if he wasn't the leader of the tribe but the lord of the sky. Li Qingshan raised his right hand. Reporting to the leader, I want a drink. The man took off the wine bag and threw it to him. He picked it up and gulped it down. After gulping it down, he let out a long breath. Good wine. His face was red. He felt energetic and full of strength. A strong sense of drunkenness rushed to his head. He raised his right hand again. Reporting to the leader, I strongly request to be the leader. The man smiled and shook his head. That won't do. Only the strongest person can be the leader. You're still far from it. Haha, don't say any more. Li Qingshan held his stomach and rolled on the ground laughing. He immediately wanted to show the power of the man deity as the descendant of the sky devil. He wanted to let this overbearing village chief broaden his horizons. But after thinking about it, he felt that it was unnecessary. After all, the man invited him to drink with good intentions. There was no need to scare him. All right, you're the leader. Whatever you say. But I'm leaving. Since his strength had recovered, it was time for him to move forward. There are many tigers and wolves in the mountain. Take this to protect yourself. The man didn't ask him to stay. He threw another item. Li Qingshan caught it. It was an ancient bronze sword. When he pulled it out of the sheath, there was no coldness or sharpness. The blade was not even drawn. One side of the sword was engraved with the sun, moon, and stars. The other side was engraved with mountains, rivers, and trees. Other than that, it was ordinary. He casually threw it back. No need. I use a knife. This is a keepsake and also a reward, the man said in a deep voice. In an instant, there was a sense that he couldn't refuse. All right. Thank you, leader. Li Qingshan casually cupped his hands. Suddenly, he flew into the sky. He turned back and asked with a smile, Leader, what's the name of our tribe? The man smiled as usual. Yoxiong. Chapter 1557. There's a bear. Li Qingshan suddenly woke up and sat up. He found himself lying on the wet ground, and beside him was a sparkling river. The wind blew past the treetops and the treetops danced in the wind. The mountain was empty and the spring was beautiful. The forest was fresh, and the air was filled with the fragrance of grass and soil. Is this a dream? His right hand touched something. It was the ancient bronze sword and he couldn't help but widen his eyes. He touched his chest again and the wine bag was already warm. He looked back and there was no sign of a bear in the forest. The atmosphere in this quiet forest suddenly became strange. As the descendant of the sky demon, he was the ancestor of playing with people's hearts. Who could easily give him a dream and make him believe it was real. At least, it was not something an ordinary hunter could do, and this wine and sword were both very unusual. He pulled out the wine stopper and sniffed it. A gush of spiritual chi rushed into his head, and his primordial spirit was cleansed. Where the wine was dense, the surrounding plants grew wildly and gradually gained spirituality, turning into spiritual herbs. The fish in the river flipped, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, the layers of black scales on their bodies shone with golden light. In an instant they became spiritual monsters. He quickly stuffed the wine bag back and looked around in surprise. Although he didn't know anything about feng shui, after becoming a human immortal, there were many things that he could feel without understanding. The feng shui of this forest had changed. He had eaten many elixirs in his life, but they couldn't be compared to this wine. And this was obviously not an ordinary wine bag, but a sumeru ring. The amount of wine stored was immeasurable. Although it was a gift from someone else, it was really too rare. It made him feel a little guilty. He stood up, waved away the carp monsters and catfish monsters, and held the ancient bronze sword tightly. With a clang he pulled the sword out of the sheath and raised it towards the sun. The sword had the sun, moon and stars. The mountains, rivers and plants were all vivid in his eyes, but he still couldn't see anything special. And this was strange in itself. Not to mention an ordinary bronze sword, it was a powerful treasure. In the eyes of a human immortal like him, he could see how the runes were carved and how the formation worked. In other words, he, a human immortal, was not qualified to hold this ancient sword. He couldn't even understand it. With a thought, he summoned a gust of cool wind and wrapped it around his body. This was the trade wind that the great sage of ventilation had given him. It contained all the information he had comprehended in the colorless realm. It wasn't wind in the ordinary sense, but the materialization of a certain law. This law allowed great sage Yuan Feng to ignore the barriers of the universe and obtain all information. It wasn't just the information that was expressed and recorded. Regardless of whether it was a plot in a secret room or a scheme in the depths of one's heart, all of it could be turned into trade winds. For him to see, for him to hear. That was why he was called the great sage of ventilation. To this macaque king there were no secrets in the world. In other words, any profound cultivation method or profound comprehension would be obtained by him and used by him. He was the embodiment of nomological laws. Li Qingshan obtaining this wisp of trade wind was equivalent to obtaining the help of this nomological law. He did not need to go through a long period of cultivation and difficult thinking. He could directly reach the highest realm of the 4 dhyanas and 8 samadhi, which was equivalent to taking an exam with the answer. Of course, his current strength was not enough to support such a realm, but as long as there was this wisp of trade wind, he could use it as a reference at any time. Moreover, they could come and go at his beck and call. There was no end to it. There was no end to it. This continued until he completely returned to the highest realm of neither thought nor no thought. Of course, that was not something that a human immortal could support. In other words, before he became a true immortal, there would be no so-called bottlenecks. If I meet a few more great sages, just give me some benefits and I will immediately have multiple nomological laws protecting my body. It can be said that, borrowing the power of heaven and earth when the time comes, how difficult would it be to become a true immortal? Thinking of this, he took a deep sip of wine. Spiritual energy washed through his primordial spirit, and his strength also increased. He immediately absorbed a wisp of trade wind, and this strength quickly weakened. His realm immediately began to rise. In his eyes, the ancient greenish bronze sword gradually changed. The mountains, rivers, grass and trees, from a simple engraved image, gradually became deep, and his mind was completely sucked in. In the blink of an eye, he passed through thousands of mountains and valleys, the sea of snow. On the vast land, the sun, moon and stars hung high in the sky. Day and night rotated and the stars moved, displaying the most amazing law. The 3,000 worlds, the 6 paths of reincarnation were all within. Everything could not be described with words. The human language was so shallow, and it was not enough to describe this grand world. In the blink of an eye, his strength was exhausted. Li Qingshan fell on his back, and the ancient greenish bronze sword returned to its ordinary appearance. He was still holding the hilt tightly and his whole body was trembling. All the divine weapons and rare treasures that he had seen and used in his life were like scrap metal compared to this sword. This was not an exaggeration but a barely stated fact. In fact, such a comparison was already a disgrace to this sword. If there was a sword spirit or a sword soul, it might kill him with one strike. Although it was impossible for a sword soul to exist, even if there was one, it would be an existence similar to the world's will, and it existed in the entire 6 paths of reincarnation and the 3,000 worlds. He swung the sword and the stars moved. I want to use a sword. Li Qingshan was extremely excited. I want to use a sword. Such a fortuitous encounter was no longer just a smoke coming out of the ancestral grave, but a fire in the ancestral grave, no, an explosion in the ancestral grave. The 18 generations of ancestors all jumped out to congratulate him. It's so cool to join the Wuxia tribe. But as his excitement gradually calmed down, he became even more confused. What was the background of the man in the bear skin? Why did he bestow this boundless land to him? Was he joking or serious? It was more and more difficult to understand. Li Qingshan never liked to be confused. Anyway, it was not a bad thing to become stronger. He put away the wine pouch and the ancient sword and bowed to the sky. Chief, no matter what your purpose is, I thank you for the wine and the sword. But he changed the topic and smiled. When I become strong enough, I still want to be the chief. Above the 9th heaven, the man's bare skin fell off, revealing a green dragon robe. The crown was swaying and he nodded with a smile. I'll wait for that day. A dragon head poked out of the sea of clouds and asked, why not kill him to get rid of future troubles? Do you feel threatened? After all, I'm the one he chose. Alas, if you didn't kill his daughter, he would probably have already bowed to me. The giant dragon closed its eyes. That was just an accident. There are no accidents in the world. The giant dragon was speechless. The man patted the dragon's head and said gently, you know, I've never blamed you. But don't do anything behind my back, or I'll chop off your head. The sky darkened, the sea of clouds surged, and the stars dimmed. Only the man's figure was high up in the sky, and his eyes were empty like the sky. The sky was murderous and the stars moved. As you wish. Chapter 1558. Broadcast. Pay attention to Chidian and get the first-hand news of the 515 red packet. Students who haven't grabbed a red packet since the new year can now show their skills. The man on the dragon's back looked back and saw through the heavens. Between the crisscrossing laws, the 6 paths slowly reincarnated, forming a multidimensional world in a form that ordinary people could not imagine or even understand. 3,000 worlds, billions of lives were all in it. Who once said that Qingzhou was 30,000 miles long, and Jianghu was only a corner? If Jianghu still existed, it was just a grain of sand among the heavens and the 10,000 worlds. When the frog at the bottom of the well painstakingly climbed out of the well along the smooth wall and finally saw the boundless starry sky, who would have known that what it had yearned for was just a small circular sky? What it had chased after was just the only star. As shallow as it was, it once mistakenly thought that it was the shape of the whole sky and that there was only one star. Now it no longer knew the shape of the sky, and in the endless sea of stars, it could no longer find the star that belonged to it. Suddenly, it understood that the only thing that belonged to it was that old well. The way of the human world, far away in the sea, in the dark. Li Qingshan emerged from the deep sea, stretched his limbs, and lay quietly on the water, staring at the dark blue circle, which was dotted with a few flashes of light. It looks like a well. But, what is well? What is that sparkling thing? Where am I? Who am I? A series of questions, all puzzled. Even though he had read every book in the world, in the end he still knew nothing. At this time, a white figure suddenly appeared. The moment she saw him, she was stunned, biting her lips, and her eyelashes fluttered. He smiled. Little and I'm back. By the way, what's my name? Little and suddenly threw herself into his arms, and waves of water rippled silently. He gently stroked her seaweed-like long hair. He felt a burst of moisture on the side of his face. Hey, why are you crying? I'm back now, aren't I? Little and asked in a hoarse voice, who are you? I asked you first. Little and raised her head, looked at him with red eyes, and asked almost interrogatively, who are you? The sound reverberated across the water. Speechless, he scratched his head. All right, I can't remember. I've forgotten many things. Your name is Li Qingshan. Little and repeated, your name is Li Qingshan. That's a good name. Li Qingshan nodded with satisfaction. As expected of the name I gave it. Little Anne, on the other hand, burst into tears. Hey, don't cry. Li Qingshan hurriedly wiped her tears, but the more he wiped, the more tears there were. Strange, in his memory she clearly didn't like to cry so much. Or did he forget something? Little and suddenly said, Qingshan, can we return to the 5 continents world? Li Qingshan stopped what he was doing. Little and lamented, if I forget everything, even if I become stronger, what's the use? Li Qingshan fell silent and looked up again. The dark circle flickered with a few unknown lights, distant and dim, making people feel lonely as if they were drifting in the deep sea. But for some reason he couldn't forget about it. That's right, he had forgotten everything except for this person and this matter. He lowered his head and looked at her sparkling eyes. So kind. So warm. At this moment, all his perseverance collapsed. As long as she could smile, he was willing to light all the fires in the world and never look up again. He smiled gently. All right, don't cry. Don't cry. If this is your wish. He closed his eyes and furrowed his brows, then opened them again, then we'll. No. Little and seemed surprised. She suddenly covered his mouth and slowly shook her head. She smiled. My wish is to always be with you no matter where we go, until death do us part. Li Qingshan suddenly felt a lump in his throat. His heart was touched and he couldn't help but shed tears. The lone star in the sky stared at the 2 people who were tightly hugging each other on the water surface. Who knew how much the frog in the well wanted to return to the well in the face of the boundless starry sky? Ha, this kid lost his memory? What an old-fashioned plot. No wonder he's a novelist. Gu Yenying stood elegantly in front of Li Qingshan, as if she was facing a silly kid. She even waved her hand in front of his eyes and joked, "Do you still remember me? You used to like me." Luo Ho Xiaoming's heart moved, but he didn't show it. He patted Li Qingshan's shoulder. "Little Li, I'm your big brother Luo Xiaoming. Big father, you still can't let go of your obsession." Li Fengyuan sat cross-legged, wearing a pilu crown and a red kasaya. He put his hands together and sighed and shook his head. Li Qingshan looked at Gu Yenying and his eyes lit up. A woman with fish lips. Gu Yenying narrowed her eyes, and her sharp gaze pointed straight at Little N beside Li Qingshan. Little N was unmoved and he even nodded. Yes, that's right. It had been a while since Li Qingshan returned, and Little N had told him everything that had happened in detail. Coupled with the spirit turtle's powerful deduction ability, he was finally no longer ignorant. Although he couldn't say that he recovered his memory, he at least knew what had happened. However, Teacher Little N seemed to have mixed some personal information in his lessons. Gu Yenying broke into laughter. She retracted her gaze and introduced herself. "I'm Gu Yenying. Losing my memory isn't necessarily a bad thing. Yenying, please be my woman." Gu Yenying's smile did not change. "I take back what I said." Li Qingshan snickered and glanced at Luo Ho Xiaoming. "Come on, Xiaoming. Xiaoming for a day, Xiaoming for life. Even if you become a god in the future, you'll still be called Xiaoming. You're my big brother? I'm your grandpa." The veins on Luo Ho Xiaoming's forehead bulged. "If it weren't for the fact that you're not in your best condition, I'd fight you right now." For the past few years he had been constantly fighting in the Azura realm, and his strength recovered extremely quickly. He had already gone through 6 heavenly tribulations, surpassing Li Qingshan. It was only a matter of time before he regained his godhood. "Fight me? Ah." Li Qingshan laughed. "You think you're not you just because you've gone through 6 heavenly tribulations?" He casually took out the 3 mountains and played with them like he was playing with a walnut. Luo Ho Xiaoming's eyes narrowed. He knew what was good for him. He could tell how powerful the 3 mountains were, and he might not be able to withstand them. "You've seen that one." "Indeed." "Great." Luo Ho Xiaoming was full of fighting spirit. "It's my honor to fight alongside them." Li Qingshan was dissatisfied. "Don't you feel honored to fight alongside me?" Luo Ho Xiaoming scoffed. "Not at all." Li Qingshan sighed. "Sigh, you're so unruly. No wonder you're the leader of the 4 heavenly kings. Do you think I'll be satisfied just because you made me the leader of the 4 heavenly kings?" Luo Ho Xiaoming rolled his eyes, but he could not help but laugh. Although it was not an honor to fight alongside him, it had always made him feel happy. In the end, Li Qingshan looked at Li Fengyuan. He frowned and turned to Little N. "Who's this bald donkey?" Chapter 1559. Li Fengyuan's expression was unfathomable at first, but when he heard this, his face fell and he said angrily, "Big old father, I'm Fengyuan. I'm also one of the 4 heavenly kings. How could you forget about me?" "Fengyuan. I think I've heard this name before." Li Qingshan smiled and pinched his chin. "How did you get into the 4 heavenly kings?" Li Fengyuan was speechless. Although he was a rare phoenix and his bloodline came from the ancient times, he was still lacking compared to the other 3 heavenly kings. He said weakly, "I'm your son?" Li Qingshan understood. "I see." He patted Li Fengyuan's shoulder. "It's no wonder you have a father like me. You're so good at relying on your father at such a young age. You have a bright future ahead of you, kid." "Yes." Li Fengyuan clenched his fists tightly. "In the stories, don't people who lose their memories have a huge change in personality?" Gu Yenying tilted her head. "I'm probably born to be this shameless." Luo Ho Xiaoming looked up at the sky. Li Qingshan ignored them and knocked on the Vairocana on Li Fengyuan's head. "Why are you dressed like this?" The so-called Vairocana was actually a Vairocana hat with 5 Buddhist crowns. The golden-red Vairocana hat was decorated with pearls and agates, and the design was exquisite. The 5 Buddhist crowns were painted with 5 gilded Buddhas, all of them solemn and dignified. Put together, it was the style of an eminent monk, not something an ordinary monk could wear. If Li Qingshan still had his memory, he would definitely remember a certain story about going to the Buddhist scriptures. Li Fengyuan put his palms together and lowered his head slightly. "Namo Amitabha, I've converted to Buddhism." Li Qingshan was slightly stunned. In that instant, Li Fengyuan really had a dignified and righteous aura. Then he flew into a rage and asked Little N, "Which bald donkey did this?" He even dared to lie to my son. I'll go and beat his bald head up right now." He then said to Li Fengyuan earnestly, "Fengyuan, I know it's not your fault. As the most useless of the 4 heavenly kings, he is too easily influenced by others." There was no hint of blame on his face. Instead, it was filled with pity, as if he was saying, "It's not your fault that your brain isn't good. It's all your fault that your biological parents abandoned you, and I didn't take good care of you. That's why you became like this." Li Fengyuan wanted to cry but had no tears. Suddenly his expression changed and he floated far away. "That day I was cultivating under the golden leaf Bodhi tree in the 100-herb garden. Whoosh! Great winds blew past. Thousands of branches and leaves shone resplendently. He opened his eyes and looked up. His eyebrows were like swords, his eyes like stars, and his long hair fluttered in the wind. No matter how amusing he was in front of Li Qingshan, his nature was still that of a proud phoenix. He had once ruled the city amongst the clouds of the 9 regions and the alien continent of the 5 regions world, and was deeply convinced by the people. He was revered as a wise ruler. As the eldest of the disciples of Green Mountain, he was called the young prince by those monkeys. He was born with the power that the divine Wutong tree had accumulated for tens of thousands of years, and the inheritance of the phoenix from the distant ancient times. The inheritance included not only the cultivation methods, but also a great amount of knowledge and memories. He couldn't bear too much when he was born, but as his cultivation state grew, these knowledge and memories were activated and became a part of his cultivation state. This was a cultivation path without any hindrance. In fact, it couldn't even be called cultivation. It was merely a natural process of growth. It was like a wild animal growing up from an infant to an adult. Long before the goddess Nviwa created the human race, when the term cultivation didn't even exist, the phoenix was already a lofty god. As long as he didn't die, it was only a matter of time before he became a god. What he didn't lack the least was time. As a phoenix that could be reborn from nirvana, his name wasn't even recorded in the book of life and death. He was born free from the threat of death and possessed all the things that people dreamed of, but he still didn't think it was enough. Though the 4 heavenly kings sounded like a joke to him, he was well aware of what kind of path Li Qingshan was taking, and what would happen to him if he failed. Thus, for 3 years he didn't leave the Bodhi tree at all. He cultivated hard day after day. In fact, even if he ate, drank, and played all day, the speed of his power growth was far faster than that of ordinary people who cultivated hard. But even if he cultivated hard, the speed of his improvement wasn't much faster. As a natural god, he paid more attention to natural growth than acquired cultivation. Under such circumstances, this speed was far from enough. Do I have to hide in the back and cheer when Big Daddy is fighting to the death at the front? Wait for him to win or die in battle. Li Fengyuan frowned, with a stubborn expression that was similar to Li Qingshan's. He needed power that could match the title of 4 heavenly kings, even if it was just a joke, cooking king. At this moment, the wind suddenly quieted down. There was no chirping of birds or chirping of insects. Everything was silent, but the leaves were still dancing. A majestic and deep Buddhist chant sounded from the sky, from the ground, and from the bottom of his heart. At first, it sounded like the buzzing of mosquitoes, but it grew louder and louder. In an instant, it sounded like a thunderous lion's roar. Sunlight shone through the gaps of the golden leaves, and suddenly it was so dazzling that one couldn't look at it directly. Li Fengyuan stared with his eyes wide open, and the light intertwined to form a lifelike image. At this point he changed the topic and asked, "Guess what I saw?" Smack. Li Qingshan knocked him on the head impatiently. "Brat, don't keep us in suspense. Tell me." Li Fengyuan said angrily, "Li Qingshan, I'm not a child anymore. Can't you show me some respect?" Li Qingshan smiled and said, "In Big Daddy's eyes, you'll always be a child." His face darkened. "If you talk nonsense again, I'll hang you up and beat you." All right. Li Fengyuan could only be honest. "I saw a Buddha statue." "Buddha statue? Are you hallucinating?" And then? Li Fengyuan spread his hands. "Then I converted to Buddhism." "Wait, did I miss a part of this story?" Li Qingshan gnashed his teeth as if he was pondering the meaning behind it. Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming looked at each other. This was not just a problem of missing the story. Li Fengyuan was not an ignorant and superstitious villager. Unless he was possessed, it was impossible for him to make a mistake. If he really saw the incarnation of a Buddha, then things would not be as simple as it seemed. Moreover, Li Fengyuan obviously hid the most important part of the story, which made people feel that there was a big problem. Little and frowned slightly. She had a deeper understanding of Buddhism. Sunlight, Buddha statue, Vairocana? Li Qingshan said, all right, let me think about it. You said you were cultivating, then you looked up and saw the sunlight like a Buddha statue, and then you converted to Buddhism? Yes. Li Fengyuan nodded. Li Qingshan grabbed Li Fengyuan's clothes. Brat, are you fucking kidding me? Li Fengyuan was not convinced. I'm fucking kidding you. Bite me, you bastard. You're rebelling. Li Qingshan raised his fist. My son hit me. Li Fengyuan shouted. Gu Yening also could not help but laugh. TSK like father like son. Li Qingshan was even more furious. He swung his fist and punched. Li Fengyuan closed his eyes. His expression was solemn as if he was going to die for justice. However, the fist stopped in front of him. He opened his eyes. Big Daddy? Li Qingshan let go of his clothes and sighed with a smile. You've really grown up. He said solemnly, you have to make your own choice and bear it yourself. You don't have to walk the same path as me. You don't owe me anything. You can do whatever you want. Remember, you have to live for yourself. I understand. Li Fengyuan looked straight into Li Qingshan's eyes. Big Daddy, I won't always be the most useless one among the 4 heavenly kings. Li Qingshan patted his shoulder. He did not pursue the matter any further. Even if he chose to become his enemy one day, there was nothing he could say. Of course, he could not be blamed for being merciless. Li Fengyuan snickered. He had come to a realization. In his unfinished story, he had indeed betrayed a few extremely important things. Eternal life or power? That was the question. However, he was not one of those old spirit turtles. If he could not follow his heart, what was the point of eternal life? However, that was all for himself, so there was no need to say anything more. He bade farewell to Li Qingshan and returned to the golden leaf Bodhi tree. As for little N. Gu Yening and Luoho Xiaoming, they all returned to the hungry ghost realm, the demonic beast realm, and the Azura realm to cultivate. After reaching the major achievement of the spirit turtle transformation, Li Qingshan was already infinitely close to the 6th heavenly tribulation. As long as he broke through any of his other transformations, he could immediately undergo the tribulation. However, the loss of his memories was far too severe. He had lost all of his comprehension, which was equivalent to several dozen bottlenecks appearing out of nowhere. If this continued, let alone advancing any further, his cultivation might even regress. Even his miniature world would collapse. As a result, he maintained the spirit turtle transformation the entire time, attempting to derive all the transformations anew. However, this was clearly not easy. The nature of the other transformations was no weaker than the spirit turtle transformation, and they possessed completely different wills. Spirit sovereign Guihai sat in the sky and derived here and there. The myriad heavenly tome had only nurtured a group of human emperors. His original cultivation was there. This was his limit. No matter how powerful his ability to derive was, their paths were different, so it was useless no matter what he said. Under these circumstances, the spirit turtle transformation instead became an obstacle. Every fiend god transformation represented a different path. If he went too far on the path of the spirit turtle, he would have to start from the beginning for the other paths. It was truly extremely difficult. His speed of derivation was as slow as a turtle's crawl. There were less than 10 years left until the Nether River Blood Oath. Seeing how time was becoming more and more pressing, he could only be patient and take it slow. Suddenly, a black paper crane drifted into the dwelling one day and unfurled slowly. Chao Qinjiao's voice rang through the cavern. Li Qingshan, the day of the final battle is approaching. Are you ready? Ah. Her laughter was filled with undisguised malice. After becoming a human immortal, bullying Li Qingshan basically became her greatest hobby. The more Li Qingshan resisted, the happier she became. Towards the end, he just played dead and let her do whatever she wanted. He treated it like he had fucked her. He had already accepted it. He had basically received retribution for taking advantage of her in the past. However, they had already been husband and wife for who knew how many nights, yet she had still not forgotten about the bet. She basically did not treat him as a human. Chapter 1560. With a flick of Li Qingshan's finger, the paper crane turned into powder and scattered on the black water. The fury in his heart was extinguished after a moment. Those 3 mountains were left for demon god Qiongqi, not for a fight with a woman. His gaze was deep and dark like the black water, rippling slightly. In the blink of an eye, he had calculated the pros and cons. If he had not forgotten everything, he might have had the power to fight. Challenging a divine General Lu Ding in his current state was undoubtedly asking to be humiliated. Thus, the best choice was to admit defeat and not give Chao Qinjiao a chance to be complacent. And that woman would definitely not expect him to avoid the battle. Yes, ever since he had mastered the spirit turtle transformation, he had always easily regained his calm and considered problems with pure rationality, so pure that it was almost ice cold. But he just felt that something was missing. But what was it missing? He lowered his head and pressed his hand against his chest. His heartbeat was extremely slow, and his blood seemed to have cooled down. It flowed along his veins to his limbs and bones, bringing with it an indescribable coldness. If he closed his eyes, he would feel like he was still drifting in the ruins of End, the black water gradually devouring his warmth and memories. Who am I? In fact, he had only heard one good story up until now. The main character was called Li Qingshan. Perhaps it had been embellished by the narrator, intentionally or unintentionally. That Li Qingshan was both brave and persistent. He usually liked to joke around, but at crucial moments he was very valiant, as if he would always be a youth. He lowered his head. On the black water, there was only the cold face of an adult man. In order not to disappoint little Anne, he tried to imitate that Li Qingshan and joke with those heavenly kings. But who am I? Looking up at the round sky, he felt that it had never been so far, and it was getting further and further away. He was sinking into the abyss alone, and one day he would sink into the ruins of End. Everything was reasonable. Losing almost all of his memories was equivalent to experiencing a cycle of reincarnation. How could it be recovered with a story or a novel? She must have sensed it the moment she saw him. That was why she had cried so bitterly. On the contrary, he had sensed it later, or perhaps even been ignorant. I am to her. More than half of me is dead, with only one breath left. She wants to keep this breath, which is why she wants to return to the 5 continents world. Water droplets fell into the black water on the jagged and overhanging stalactites. His eyes flickered slightly. For a split second, his smile was filled with sorrow and bitterness, but it disappeared in a flash. He gritted his teeth and struggled to get up with a ferocious expression. He broke free from all the beliefs his spirit turtle bloodline had bestowed upon him. What calm planning! What self-preservation! He had to accept the challenge. Even if he brought disgrace upon himself, he absolutely couldn't admit defeat. Otherwise, would I still be Li Qingshan? He took a deep breath and roared towards the heavens. Black water surged, rumbling in the abyss as it rushed into the heavens. Fight. Before falling into the abyss. You have no choice. The day of the final battle, the Black Tortoise Arena. The true disciples had arrived long ago. They were chatting and laughing at the viewing platform on the cliff. Chao Qinjiao had specially invited them to watch the battle. Even if they didn't have an invitation, how could they not watch such a lively scene? Someone asked with a smile, "Lutian, why don't you start gambling?" Lutian shrugged. I'm not qualified. Clearly he wasn't just talking about himself. The true disciples looked at each other. No one was dissatisfied. One was the eldest senior brother, the army commander, a ruthless character who faced the demon god head-on. The other was a human immortal. The head of the 6 deities was a true marshal. The weak gambled with the strong. Even if the strong did not mind, they were overestimating themselves. They deserved to be slapped to death. Besides, these 2 people were quite vengeful. Lutian crossed his hands behind his head and said lazily, "If I start the bet, who do you want to bet on?" Of course, senior sister Chao. Although the eldest senior brother is powerful, senior sister Chao wants to teach him a lesson. Then there's a match. What's the match? I'm teaching my son. Ah. Everyone roared with laughter. All these years, Chao Qinjiao had taught Li Qingshan a lesson. All kinds of jokes were spread among the true disciples. Such a bet was meaningless. The combat power of a human immortal was completely overwhelming. It was not something a human emperor could compare to. To put it bluntly, it was a complete farce. Only Lutian suddenly came to a realization. He turned and bowed. Greetings, eldest senior brother. Li Qingshan stood with his hands behind his back on another cliff not far away. He looked like a philosopher in deep thought. The true disciples were immediately dumbfounded. Greetings, eldest senior brother. Especially the one who was joking, he was even more flustered. Eldest senior brother, when did you come? It's been a while. Li Qingshan looked back. His eyes were deep and serene as if he could see through everything. It made the true disciples feel like they were facing spirit sovereign Guihai. They instantly recalled every detail of the demon domain battlefield. That peerless stance of challenging the demon god. Only then did they suddenly realize that the shadow of war had never gone far. The person in front of them was the brightest and brightest mark of that terrifying nightmare. No matter how they joked, they could not dim it. The scales of victory in their hearts immediately wavered. Maybe eldest senior brother really has a chance? Guan Yaozhu sighed inwardly. He has become increasingly unfathomable. It's just that he seems to have changed a lot. Li Qingshan retracted his gaze and continued to ponder. It was not that he could not joke, but now he was even more indifferent. Even if he tried his best to deduce and calculate, he could not find a chance. He suddenly looked up. A silver star suddenly lit up in the clear sky. A beam of starlight shot over and transformed into a silver-armored and white-robed Valkyrie in midair. She was riding on a black-furred sky-gazing hoe. She looked majestic and imposing. "Greetings, senior sister." The true disciples did not dare to look straight at her. They all bowed their heads. That was the natural pressure brought about by the difference in their ranks. Li Qingshan stared silently. His eyes flickered. No need for formalities. Chao Qinjiao generously waved her hand and pretended to ponder. I vaguely remember that someone wanted to challenge me back then? Li Qingshan was speechless. How could he remember what happened back then? He only knew that it happened. Chao Qinjiao continued to provoke him. I think it was a guy with the surname Li. He was called Black Mountain and Green Mountain. Who is it? Stand out if you have the guts. Li Qingshan continued to remain silent. Or rather, that question had triggered his thoughts again. What? Were you castrated? Chao Qinjiao found it strange. If it were in the past, he would have lost his composure long ago and fought with his life on the line. Why was he so well behaved today? It was as if he had changed into a different person. What exactly happened during this period of time? It couldn't be that he really castrated himself to prevent her from succeeding, right? Right at this moment, a voice that was 10 times more mocking than Chao Qinjiao resounded in the Black Tortoise arena. Slut, do you want to try? A man walked over in the air. His chest and scarlet robes were tattered. He was blazing like fire and dyed the sky red. The gloomy and violent aura turned into a violent gale, causing the sky to change color. Chapter 1561. Li Qingshan and Li Qingshan looked at each other at the same time. They had the same figure and appearance, but no one would mistake them for the same person. They were completely different ice and fire. They were also different from the original Li Qingshan. The black water of the ultimate and the torture of hell had left a clear mark on them, creating a huge and irreconcilable difference. Indifference or madness, silence or roar, acceptance or revenge. Sparks flew as they stared at each other. One sneered, his killing intent blazing. The other silently held the 3 mountains. The atmosphere in the Black Tortoise arena suddenly changed, as if they had returned to the tragic battlefield of the demon realm. No true disciple dared to treat this as a joke. Chao Qinjiao was furious. Bastard, who are you calling a slut? Wait, primordial spirit? Hey, I'm talking about whoever agreed. Li Qingshan suppressed his killing intent and turned to look at Chao Qinjiao, but in his heart he was thinking, that's not the look of me. In that case we'll have to fight. However, he didn't realize that his eyes were much gloomier after returning from hell. His tattered robe fluttered in the wind, making him look like a demon. The true disciples were in an uproar. Primordial spirit. Li Qingshan had only been in the sect for 30 years. From a small nascent soul cultivator to a disciple, he had condensed his yin spirit and yang spirit, becoming the eldest senior brother of the myriad nature sect. For cultivators like them, this was just a few seclusion sessions. This was already incredible enough, but now he had gone one step further and survived 6 heavenly tribulations. This was challenging their understanding, and their minds were in a mess. Yes, if he's not a primordial spirit cultivator, how can he have such an aura and compete with senior sister Chao? But how is this possible? Is he the reincarnation of some mighty figure? Is there a son of destiny in the human world? Even Chao Qinjiao found it unbelievable and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" With her eyesight, she immediately saw the huge difference between the two Li Qingshan. She vaguely guessed that Li Qingshan's yang spirit had gone out of control. She didn't know what kind of opportunity he had encountered, but he had survived 6 heavenly tribulations and cultivated an primordial spirit. Such incidents were not rare in the cultivation world, and the consequences were often disastrous. Her question was of utmost importance. If this primordial spirit Li Qingshan used another name, it would mean that he had to sever all ties with his original self, and there would be a possibility of coexistence. However, if his answer was still Li Qingshan, then a life-and-death battle would be unavoidable. The sky could not have 2 suns and a country could not have 2 masters. It was impossible for there to be 2 Li Qingshan in the world. This bastard kid, he didn't hesitate to sacrifice his yang spirit to deceive me. Now he's getting what he deserves. She was in a dilemma, not knowing which side to stand on. If he sat back and did nothing, Li Qingshan would definitely die. Li Qingshan, who was on the ground, muttered to himself, "Who am I?" Li Qingshan, who was in the sky, laughed. This question was too easy to answer. "I'm your uncle." The corner of Chao Tianjiao's eyes twitched and she suddenly laughed out loud. "Good, that's great. This was supposed to be a life and death duel, but I've been playing for so many years and I really can't kill him. Now I don't have a headache." She slowly pulled out a long silver saber. The stars on the saber were shining, arranged in the 7 mansions of the black tortoise. The light was like mercury spilling on the ground, and the cold murderous aura was like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. In the sky, Li Qingshan strolled calmly with his hands behind his back. Although it's said that, to resist foreign aggression, one must first pacify the interior, it's hard to dispel the hatred in my heart if I don't teach you a lesson today. He clearly remembered all the things he had been bullied over the years, and he gnashed his teeth in hatred. He knew that his other self was observing him, and he also knew that Chao Tianjiao was not an opponent that could be easily defeated. If he couldn't win, things would become very troublesome. But he just wanted to let himself see who the real Li Qingshan was. A cold light flashed. Chao Tianjiao made the first move. Li Qingshan was cut in half in the air. He laughed and said, "That's it? Let's see how many times you can divide it." Chao Tianjiao laughed coldly. She waved her saber extremely slowly, turning hardness into softness. The saber's edge released rings of silver light that were as bright as the moon. The brilliance was all-encompassing, layer upon layer. In an instant, countless cruel and murderous black tortoise saber astral saber condensed. Li Qingshan's thick eyebrows raised. This woman really didn't stay in the 9 heavens for nothing. Everyone watched as Li Qingshan was sliced apart layer by layer. Every slice was so thin that one could clearly see his blood vessels and bones, and they scattered in the sky. Chao Tianjiao didn't feel proud at all. She knew very well that until now, he had taken the initiative to divide his primordial spirit. The layers of Li Qingshan had a mocking face on every slice. From the smallest slice on the fingertip to the largest slice on the chest, they all said together, "Good saber technique, but it's useless." Such a strange scene left everyone dumbfounded. It was something that they wouldn't even dream of in their nightmares. "Useless? Then try this." Chao Tianjiao's expression was stern. She raised her saber high. Brilliance flowed backward and gathered on the saber's edge, becoming brighter and brighter. In the blink of an eye, it was so dazzling that one couldn't look at it directly. It dyed the entire black tortoise arena into a silver world. Under the silver radiance, every cut surface became sluggish, losing the carefree feeling of being light as a feather. Li Qingshan felt immense pressure. Coldness quickly seeped into his primordial spirit, as if he had returned to the glacier of the hell realm. However, this coldness was far more destructive than the torture of hell. Such an indiscriminate attack rendered all transformation techniques useless. It became a battle of pure strength. Chao Tianjiao was a human immortal, but he didn't have a physical body. In a sense, he was just a ghost immortal. Not only was he restrained by his abilities, but he also didn't have an advantage in terms of strength. If this went on, it was only a matter of time before he was defeated. All the slices were pieced together again, but they didn't form a human figure. It was as if they had messed up the order in their panic, turning into a monster that was made up of humans but was completely inhuman. Furthermore, it was as if it was forcefully piecing them together. Every part was growing wantonly, growing countless limbs. It became more and more strange and distorted, indescribable. All the true disciples' minds were violently impacted. The more they wanted to distinguish it, the more painful and confused they became. They wanted to shift their gazes away, but they couldn't do it. They were firmly attracted. There were countless faces on the indescribable monster's body. There were countless different expressions on them. Laughter, anger, fear, mockery, guilt. There were countless changes in emotions, causing them to lose control and almost go berserk. Chao Tianjiao's blade trembled slightly, and the silver brilliance dimmed. The indescribable monster had countless mouths on its body. They were making indescribable sounds at her, and her mind was buzzing. Chapter 1562. Oh no! Chao Tianjiao's heart sank and a warm feeling filled her entire back. It was as if the silver armor didn't exist, and her skin was pressed tightly against his chest. She said angrily, "Bastard, despicable." In a head-on battle, Li Qingshan was no match for him. Even if he used the world-destroying divine fire, it would be useless. Moreover, the way of true martial was full of killing intent, which was very good at restraining devils. However, when they were ambushed at Cold Blood Pass, he had sacrificed his yang spirit to help her condense the black tortoise's primordial spirit through dual cultivation. This left a loophole, a back door that was only open to him. Originally, Li Qingshan wasn't strong enough. Even if he sneaked in, he would be beaten up. Now that he had gone through 6 heavenly tribulations, they were in the same realm, so the situation was reversed. "Ha, you have the cheek to say that." Li Qingshan smiled evilly. "Bitch, have you forgotten how you've treated me all these years?" Chao Qinjiao said angrily, "If you call me bitch again you'll what?" Li Qingshan's hand passed through the armor and placed it on her chest. "Stop." Chao Qinjiao was embarrassed and angry. "Not here." "Okay, then let's go somewhere else." Li Qingshan chuckled and pounced on her. Chao Qinjiao's vision blurred. The black tortoise arena disappeared, and the scenery in front of her was extremely familiar. The river gurgled, the willows swayed, and a familiar voice sounded in her ears. "Do you still remember? This is our old place." This was the illusion from their first dual cultivation, but this time she clearly knew that she had been dragged into a nightmare by him. Instead, she heaved a sigh of relief. Then she realized that there was no saber in her hand, no armor on her body, only a thin layer of gauze that faintly outlined her perfect figure. She was tightly held in his arms. She angrily slapped back, but her hand was weak and powerless. He casually caught it and said with a smile, "Let's do it again. Let's dual cultivate." The direct disciples woke up from the chaos. In the sky, the indescribable monster had already disappeared, leaving only Chao Qinjiao in the sky. Her face was expressionless, and her eyes were tightly shut, as if she had fallen into a deep sleep. They looked at each other in shock. They knew that the move Li Qingshan used just now wasn't aimed at them. They were just affected by it. Otherwise, they would have already gone berserk and even died from madness. The power of a human deity is truly terrifying. Or I should say, as expected of eldest senior brother. No matter how bad the situation is, he still has the ability to turn things around. They simultaneously looked at Li Qingshan, who was on the cliff, yet they saw that not only was there no complacent expression on his face, his expression was solemn, as if he was facing a great enemy. This was because he had also been affected by it, as well as the deep malice from his other self. Due to the spirit turtle's bloodline, he naturally suppressed all demonic thoughts, so he was not affected too much. However, he could clearly see that when the monster vanished and his other self appeared behind Chao Qinjiao in human form, saying, "Don't forget, I'm your inner demon," he was looking at himself. As he stared at the blue sky, his abyss-like heart rippled slightly. The situation was overwhelmingly disadvantageous to him. That was no regular enemy but himself, who possessed the most complete memories. He knew everything about the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine. Not only was he extremely skilled in slaughter, but he also possessed terrifying determination and willpower. Right now, the best plan was to retreat to the Netherism dwelling. He had already reconstructed the Netherism formation, which was enough to stop regular human deities. However, he only sat there without moving. A stubbornness that did not belong to the spirit turtle made him remain where he was. Light shone in his eyes and he waved his hand resolutely. Pieces of the spirit turtle's profound shell flew through the air, stacking together to form an indestructible fortress. He did not hope for this defense to be of much use. It was just to avoid sudden attacks and give him enough time to react. Gripping the 3 mountains tightly, he said sternly, "Let's fight to the death, Li Qingshan." Today, only a single person could continue using this name. At this moment, Chao Qinjiao's presence rapidly weakened, as if it had been sucked into an invisible black hole. In the nightmare, Li Qingshan conquered and plundered her wantonly. She did not put up much resistance, as if she was completely submerged in pleasure. She would only look at him with a strange gaze from time to time. No matter how many vicious words he uttered, this was not a battle to the death. They were not some irreconcilable enemy. Instead, they were partners of cultivation. Who knew how many times they had shared pleasure like this? This time he was just turning the tables and becoming the master. Simply put, he would change their positions. Otherwise, even if he used an opening, he would not have succeeded so easily. Even if he could succeed, he would not dare to do as he pleased. Based on Chao Qinjiao's personality, she would rather die indiscriminately than be humiliated for no reason. Chao Qinjiao suddenly asked, "Are you really going to kill yourself?" Li Qingshan said angrily, "It's none of your business. This is my own business." Which one of you should I acknowledge? No matter which one it is, I don't need you to acknowledge me. I'm really curious. What have you been through? You seem to have suffered a lot. Chao Tianjiao suddenly reached out and caressed Li Qingshan's cheeks, as if she was feeling pity for him. After so many years of fighting and fooling around, of course, the main reason was that she had beaten him mercilessly. If she had been merciless, why would she have left any openings? At this moment, their hearts were connected and there was even a hint of sorrow. Only extreme pain could make a person so strong. Don't pity me. Li Qingshan frowned, grabbed her wrist and pressed her to the ground. He tried his best to absorb as much power as possible through dual cultivation to temporarily make up for the lack of a physical body. Even so, he still harbored a deep sense of wariness. Are you still afraid that you can't win? Chao Tianjiao was puzzled. I've never underestimated myself. Li Qingshan had a clear intuition that in his hands, there must be a great killing weapon that could kill him. It was very likely that it came from the ultimate, from another great sage. If that's the case, why not let yourself live? Just go our separate ways. Chao Tianjiao licked her lips, purposely using a joke to cover up her worry. I can still change things up a little. It's not fun to perish together. Don't worry. No matter what, Li Qingshan will survive. Otherwise, who will continue on this path to the 9 heavens? That person doesn't have to be me. If it really came to the point where he had to perish together, he would not hesitate. If sacrificing himself could help him, then so be it. Even if he killed himself, as long as this precious message from the endless hell was passed on, everything would not be in vain. Continue. Continue no matter what. Chao Tianjiao was taken aback. You really are a madman. Li Qingshan smiled and waved his hand. Goodbye, bitch. On the cliff, Li Qingshan's heart shivered. It's here. The sky suddenly darkened. A hideous demon god with indigo-colored skin, 3 heads, and 6 arms stood in the sky. It bore the bearing of a heavenly demon and was furious. A black aura wrapped around it, rising up like fire. It was filled with an unprecedented will of destruction and annihilation. Destroy the enemy, destroy the world, and destroy itself. A vertical eye suddenly opened on its forehead. In the next moment, the apocalyptic fire incinerated the entire cliff, destroying the fortress condensed from the spirit turtle's profound shell. Surrounded by the all-destroying fire, the other Li Qingshan raised the mountain-moving tablet high into the air. This was an arcane treasure personally bestowed by the mountain-moving sage. It was enough to fend off a demon god, so it easily separated the apocalyptic fire. The 3 mountains began to grow restless. In the sky, the pupils of Li Qingshan, who had assumed the form of a heavenly demon, narrowed. He immediately felt life-threatening danger. This is the treasure I obtained from Ruin's End. It really is powerful. Although he might be the first person to die to this thing, since this was the path he had chosen, he did not care about the mockery of fate. Come. But in the next moment, I put down the mountain-moving tablet in his hand and opened his arms towards the sky. Li Qingshan was stunned at first before becoming furious. He had never thought there would be a day when I would actually give up on resisting and allow myself to be slaughtered by someone else. Even if that person was him. This son of a bitch was not worthy of using the name Li Qingshan, but he would never let this heaven-sent opportunity slip by. He lunged into the body of the demonic god and began to possess it. In the beginning he was still cautious against me, wondering if me had any tricks up his sleeves. However, me did not resist at all, nor did he have any intention of dying together. He silently allowed me to take over everything. Li Qingshan questioned furiously, why? Could it be that a trip to Ruin's End had turned me into such a pathetic state? Was my will so weak that it could not even withstand a single blow? I closed his eyes. The past flashed before his eyes. Apart from the dark Ruin's End, there was only her face. From a certain perspective, he was like a baby that had just been born a few months ago. Apart from the remnant memories of his past life, there was only the days and nights he spent with her, the tears and laughter. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.